Patrick, I stopped the recording and started it again, so you're free to go
Great.
when you're ready.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the second part, the resumed meeting of December 2021 of Manhattan Community Board 1. After adjourning the meeting, we're resuming for regular business, and Patrick Cannell will be chairing the rest of the meeting. We have two items on the agenda, and I just want to frame this for everyone. There's a lot of interest. They're both big meaty items with a lot of community involvement and interest. So I want to be clear that we want to hear everybody out, but there are many public forums in which both of these items are being aired out. So we're not going to be able to solve everyone's problems tonight, but we do plan to run an efficient, timely, and orderly meeting. But we want to get to everybody's questions. But please, let's be cognizant of the fact that there are two very big items, and the time will slip away pretty quickly. We spent nearly an hour on the first one, and I do not plan to have us here for an hour of each of these ones. But with that, we're going to move to the first item on our resumed agenda, which is an update on the borough-based jail Manhattan Detention Center complex. We're going to have a construction update and then a specific presentation on a proposal by the Department of Design regarding a Sally Port that has to go before the Public Design Commission. I know we have a lot of potential presenters or folks from the city agencies on with us for this one, so I'll ask you to quickly introduce yourselves, and then whoever's going to take the wheel, please do so. And if you can, try to do two things. Limit your presentation to maybe, say, 15 minutes or so. If it's shorter, excellent. And when answering questions, if you could just remember to be as brief as possible and direct in your answers, that'll help move things along. So with that, who's here?
Patrick, can I just make one more request, which is that when someone is presenting and even preferably asking questions, that they have their video on?
We can request that. I don't have a way to force it.
A request.
Yeah, sure.
A request.
So, Diana, who do we have presenting on?
We have a team of folks. Norberto, who would you like to kick it off? I gave Lauren has presenter privileges, so she should be able to screen your presentation.
So Lauren, there you are. I'm sure she'll be able to share screen in a moment. And Jeff Margolis from Department of Design and Construction will be assisting us through the first few slides.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. First off, I apologize. It is the witching hour, and my 8- and 6-year-old are not quite behaving. So if you hear any screaming, don't call the police. It's just children being tired. So thank you all. Jeff Margolis. I head up Intergovernmental and Community Affairs for the Department of Design and Construction. Thank you for having us. As you mentioned, we're here tonight mainly to talk about the Sally Port, the interim measure we need to take into account to accommodate Department of Corrections as the Manhattan facility is being dismantled and then built. So as you mentioned, this is a PDC requirement. We recognize there's a lot of interest in the overall construction plan for the dismantle and of course the facility. We will have more to come. We actually have not fully onboarded our design builder for the dismantle, so we will have to come back to you in the very near future to go over some more of the construction mitigation efforts that we introduced a few months ago. So Lauren, if you want to keep going. And just to note, I have colleagues from Department of Corrections, MOCJ, Mayor's Office of Community Affairs Unit, and then the program management team that's assisting DDC and the city to build the 4 facilities, as well as a design builder for the dismantle. Even though they're not officially on board, part of their duties is to present about the Sally Port. So again, I sort of went over the introduction, Manhattan site schedule. So you can see on the slide, hopefully everyone can see it, where we are today. As with other boroughs, we broke up the contract into 2 pieces, the project into 2 pieces. There's a dismantle design builder, which I mentioned they're going to be officially on board by the end of this month. even though they're here with us today. And then we have, at the same time, we are also moving forward with the request for proposal for the actual facility. So we expect to have a short list of firms by the end of this month as well. And then in terms of the Sallyport, once we issue that notice to proceed to the dismantled design builder, they will get started very soon. I don't think you'll see physical construction in January. They'll be getting permits, putting together safety plan, traffic plan, etc. So we can come back again and tell you when that actual construction will start. That will continue until approximately summer of 2022. And then at the same time, as I mentioned, we will be continuing procurement for the facility, and we expect to issue the notice to proceed for the actual facility. There'll be a selection process in Q1 of 2023. So you can sort of see the overall timeline here. Substantial completion and turnover to DOC is in 2027. And at that point, the Sallyport that was constructed over the next 8 months or so will be removed because it will no longer be needed. So right now I'm actually going to turn it over to Robert from Miro, who's going to walk you through some of the images for the Sallyport and address some of the concerns you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Want to make sure you all can hear me?
We can.
Excellent, thank you. We had a little bit of trouble with our system earlier, as I think everybody does all the time with this, but this is the new world. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for having us. Let's go right into the next slide if we can. So the site we're talking about here is at 100 Center Street, the Wiley Corbett and Charles Myers building from 1941, and we're looking at the northwestern corner of the facility in what is essentially the great civic center of downtown Manhattan. And as we zoom closer, you'll see the outline in the dashed blue lines that show the site of the proposed interim Sallyport. Let's go to the next one, please. Some photographs of the existing conditions, the large pier at the magnificent entry there, straight on. Sallyport existing to the left behind the two gray roll-ups. Another view of the same area pointing out that width of sidewalk. So the blue again represents the area that we're talking about, which is the Sallyport is where people in custody are taken into the building. So that represents the path that gets them from drop off into the facility itself. Existing elevation of the building. And the proposed Sallyport, which as you can see extends a slight bit larger than the width of one of these 3 towers that makes up the building. And then the elevations on the side that shows its extent. We have a few views of the project in place. So these are primarily made of metal panel and glass as the prime materials. We'll talk about colors in a second when we get to a material board, but this is the scale of the building of the proposed interim facility in context. The area where the entry to the Sallyport is, with the officer booth to the left. And then to the other side, this is the bail payment center adjacent to the staircase. Another view showing the scale of that piece as we move towards the entry. The materials are, as I mentioned, primarily metal panel and glass. The glass has a window privacy film on it so that there can be some degree of discretion in the process of bail payment, but still allows complete view of whether it's occupied or not. The metal panels are specifically chosen to work with the granite at the base of the existing facility. And the glass itself is in level 3 ballistic. Let's go to the next slide and we can see the color choice. So this is the granite that's at the base of the building. So we're looking for 2 discrete materials to break down the scale of that element so that the dark one matches the dark spots within that granite, and the light one, which is a champagne bronze, will allow us to get closer to that very nice color of the base building. I think I did that in less than 12 minutes.
Great. Are we at the end of the presentation?
Yes.
So, okay. So what we'll do is take questions from members of the committee, then members of the public specific to this proposal. I will take the liberty of going first, and I think I got it maybe in the second to last slides. But a big question I had is, why do you need this? I understand it's temporary. I understand it somehow relates to the dismantling of the old MDC complex for part of the borough-based jail construction. But can you explain that a little bit more?
Jeff, you're going to take this?
I mean, Robert, if you want to, please go ahead.
Don't jump at once.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So we have to, as part of the dismantle process, Robert is part of that team. The design builders have to come and dismantle the tower, the two garages that we showed you. That is where the buses currently enter the facility to transport detainees to the criminal court. So in the interim, while the dismantle is done and then the facility is eventually built, Department of Corrections still needs that ability to transport those folks into the facility.
And would it be correct to say that now the temporary solution is more or less being affixed to the side of 100 Center Street, which will clear the site, at least except for traffic in and out, so that you can complete this function, or DDC or DOC can complete this function, right?
Correct. Sasha, I don't know if you had anything more to add. You're there.
No, I think that was really great. My name is Sasha Ginsberg, and I'm the executive director of the borough-based jail system at the Department of Correction. And we still have to, courts are still operating, and while we are dismantling all of the borough facilities, all of the people in custody in the department will be held on Rikers Island, and so we have to transport them to the various boroughs for their court productions, and this is the temporary solution that will allow us to maintain operations. And just to answer maybe the second part of the question that might not have been asked, but the bail payment center is also currently located within the DOC facility in what is 124, 125 White Street. And so we are required by law to also provide that within a half mile of the courthouse. So this was the only viable solution for that as well.
Okay, thanks. Hands up, I see Alice Blank. Alice, you're first.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, Patrick, you got the main question answered, which is what exactly this was for. But then we seem to have gotten from our last speaker, Sasha, that this is actually also going to be for bail. Somehow, this is sort of administrative, not just an entryway into the court. I think it would be helpful to everyone, and certainly to me, is to go back to a floor plan of the Sally Port and describe, how it's being used and sort of how it's functioning. We sort of jumped into materials, but, maybe a floor plan would be handy, or maybe a few of these drawings. But I think the plan is generally a good one to start. I think there was something even before this, maybe this shot before this, there was something before the site plan that went pretty quickly.
We don't have a specific floor plan
right here. Well, okay, yeah, I guess we don't seem to have a plan of that blue block, which is the Sally Port. So maybe just using that, if you could inform us as to how it works. So the Manhattan Detention Complex is going down to the left of it. You're now in front of the criminal court, and I'm sure you're aware that this community board has very concerned about the preservation of the court. It's not a landmark building, so I'm kind of curious about how this affects that building. It sounds like this is going to be up for 6 or 7 years. Can you confirm that this is going to be there till 2027? Is that the idea? I guess that's
correct.
One.
Until the new facility.
Okay, just go ahead. So is the idea that a truck or something, or whatever, buses pull up to the larger blue rectangle? I have to say, I think it's hard to be able to really opine on this without a floor plan and understanding of what we're really talking about. There's very few drawings that, for me as an architect, indicate what we're really looking at. But I guess that's the way it goes. But
well, let me say, Alice, not to interrupt you, but if there are other drawings or parts of the presentation, I certainly didn't mean in my little speech earlier to limit you from presenting those. If there are members of the committee who need to see those and you have them in your deck, please put them up.
thanks, Patrick.
In the meantime, Alice, I can try to talk through the process, through the sequence with the blue block on the screen as it is at the moment. To the left of the blue block, you can see immediately between the Manhattan Detention Complex and the grayed out 100 Center, that zone, that strip in between is the existing Sally Port, which is accessed from both sides, both from Baxter Street as well as from Center Street. In the interim facility, the buses will back into the blue from the north. So they'll pull onto the sidewalk in the same place they pull in now, but then take a quick left and back into the short end to the north of the site, which is the left of the slide. The buses then will release the people in custody from the buses, who are then taken by a ramp over the top of the existing stairs through that through the eastern part of the blue, the upper part of the drawing, where they go into the building. They are completely isolated from the public, from both the lower and upper levels. The bail payment center to the right is also an independent facility that is accessed from the sidewalk and not from the Sally Port. It has a hard barrier between the two. So that is an independent program that's not related. So the plan of that interior is really the buses that pull in, drop off the people in custody, who are then taken by officers to into the facility.
I appreciate the verbal description. I have to be honest, I think this is a woefully incomplete, with all due respect, presentation for anyone to really understand what's at stake here, with descriptions of administrative servicing on a major street and, 7 years of impact. And I really feel that we're not quite there yet. This is a personal feeling. I couldn't possibly really be able to opine myself as to what this really all means. But looking at it just as a blue block in front of that very majestic and, as you rightfully described, magnificent entry, this seems like a really terrible compromise. I don't know. I'm sure you aren't thrilled. Maybe you are, but I would love to know alternatives that were looked at, and if there couldn't be other things to review here. But it concerns me greatly to see a building of this stature to be with this wart thrown at it. And I know that this has nothing to do with architecture in your minds, and it's all to do with, I'm sure, fair social justice reform here and getting people into the court fairly. And that is very important too. But I think we really should be trying as a community to achieve both. And I do not think this yet succeeds at that. And I also think the community is not in a position to look at this and really be able to understand it fully. And that be that. Thanks very much, Patrick. And thank you to you all for your response.
Thanks, Alice. Before we go on to other questions, I just want to clarify, and the presentation team can correct me if I'm wrong, but in response to something I think is on the minds of members of the public, just to clarify, this is not a limitation on the entrance to the court for the public. This is a function of getting detainees in and out of the court system, and to do so safely for Department of Correction and the detainees themselves. With that, Tammy, I see you're next, then Vicky,
If
then
I could,
Rosa.
I just wanted to jump in for a second. Sorry to interrupt, Patrick.
Yep, no, please
So
correct me if I'm
my
wrong.
colleagues were texting me in the meantime. We do have a floor plan. Again, we were trying to limit the number of slides, and clearly that may have been an error, but we can send a floor plan which will hopefully give the community board and the committee a better sense of what the Sally Port will look like. So
Okay,
that's helpful.
Jeff, if there's any way you can grab access to that, and again, I don't know whether it's Diana or somebody who can get it on the screen to help with Alice's concern, that would be great. We have plenty of other questions in the meantime, We're going to go to Tammy, then Vicky, then Rosa. Then I see no other committee members' hands up, but we do have a number of hands up from the public. So let's roll through it quickly. Tammy, please.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask, you mentioned that there is a legal requirement for all services to be within a half a mile. With the changes post-COVID and corporations all around Lower Manhattan constricting the space, and there's a wide amount of commercial space available, why, instead of such a large build out, or maybe there was, I don't know, but can you speak to whether or not any commercial spaces that are currently vacant were looked at within a several block radius to this facility instead of building out the Sallyport to the largest extent possible?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So, and it's this will, I think, become a lot more clear when a site plan is shown. But the Bale Human Center is actually quite a small, takes up quite a small footprint within the Sallyport. We explored quite a number of options for the temporary bail window. We had some constraints due to timeline and city regulations. We needed, in order to have the bail window operable by the time that we needed to be out of MDC, we needed it to be in on a city-owned property. And so it needed to be within space that DCAS already owned and operated. We explored a few options around, within that within a half mile, of the courthouse. And due to, certain renovations that were required, making them ADA accessible, none of the options did work out, but we definitely explored. So we did quite a bit of work and kind of ended up here as one of the only options that is viable within the timeline that we are working on.
We can share screen if people would like right now. We can be given control. We can.
This is for the floor plan?
Yes.
Great. Please do.
Thank you, Patrick. I do not have any other additional questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can you see the screen?
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Alice, particularly, I think you were interested in this, right?
I would imagine I'm not the only one, but
I say particularly, but right. You
yeah.
raised the issue, so
Yeah,
you need
I
to
would
talk
say
about
that
it.
I'll need to see a full deck of the entire presentation whenever I'm obviously probably can't happen now, but elevations and sections and a full, if we're asked to vote on something. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for showing what you're showing now. That's great.
And thank you, city team, for putting that together so quickly. All right, we're going to go Vicky Cameron, Rosa, and then Vera Sung. I see your hand up as well.
Thanks, Patrick. Just to kind of confirm, you are practically taking up the entire sidewalk, right? You are taking up the entire public domain with this proposed addition, correct? And
Robert, do you know how many feet remain on the sidewalk?
There's a 13 feet clear.
Thank you. I see it right there.
But you're taking up 30 feet, right? And then trucks will be going onto the public sidewalk in order to be able to back up.
Yes.
And again, I think we're trying to work with what we have available to us. I understand the concern.
You understand it's public space, and you've just taken it from us.
Well, we're doing the best. We're trying to. As Sasha mentioned, we have to maintain access to the courthouse for the detainees.
Well, we understand. You know how we feel. We're against this anyway, and now this mega addition will diminish the sidewalk by 29 feet. Just pointing that out.
Understood. We don't take these things lightly. I think we're doing the best with the space that we have.
So you're plowing ahead. So our concerns don't seem to matter.
But Vicky, that is a huge concern, and I think warrants a massive bullet point in our resolution.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Could we scroll through these drawings now that they're up, Patrick, just quickly, just to look through them? I mean, or is that not?
Sure. Let's try to multitask, and so we'll do that and ask Rosa to proceed with her questions, and then Vera.
Okay, actually Vicky covered my single biggest concern, which is the sidewalk. And if you look at the top of this image here, and you see the plan for the vehicles to get in and out, that is really concerning, because what that essentially means is that entire length of sidewalk. I mean, what is that length of sidewalk that we're talking about? That includes the sally port, but also the maneuvering space for the vehicles. What is that length? Because that's essentially being removed from public usability there. Like, people should not be using that sidewalk because that's dangerous. Correct? Because your vehicles will be going back and forth.
It is correct. Exactly my point. Thanks, Vera.
Yeah, that's actually incredibly concerning, because I was originally going to come in and say, oh my God, the sidewalk's been reduced by a width of 30 feet. And really, even though you're marking 13 feet clear, the reality is that because you've got lampposts and trees and whatnot there, the reality is that it's actually significantly less usable crossing space. But now looking at this vehicle plan,
And
that
don't forget
means
the
that
double
entire,
parking right in that spot. That's going to make it even more treacherous for the pedestrian.
yeah, that to me is actually a safety issue as a pedestrian, to be able to get around this area. That means you can't, right? That entire section of street, like, what is that length there that we're talking about? That's inclusive of the entire sally port, as well as the vehicle maneuvering space that you need to be able to get in and out of that parking zone. What is that length?
We'll have
Can
to
anybody
get
answer
back to you on the number.
Okay, but that entire area is out of use, right? There's no way people should be crossing there or walking there in any way, shape, or form. That's not safe. Or do you actually see people utilizing that sidewalk? How does that work?
You know, Rosa, not to pile on, but to pile on, when you have construction projects like that going on at a private commercial property or residential property, you have to have DOT mandates that you have flaggers if there's any impediment like that in a sidewalk, such that, I mean, the safety issue is so paramount that DOT doesn't even allow private citizens to do that. I don't see how the city gets away with it.
Well, because the city is the city, but I shouldn't be so.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I shouldn't say that. Okay, so that is a huge concern for me, because that essentially means that, to me, that's the same thing as basically closing off that entire sidewalk, period. Right? So that was point one. Second one, because this is a design thing, I'm very sorry, but it's horrendously ugly and blank and depressing. What you were proposing for the sally port is is the most depressing public space intervention that I have seen in a really, really long time. And I've seen a lot of stuff pass by on the screen. I think that no matter that it's temporary, you can be temporary and still have some vague attempt at engagement with the street, right? And that is just sad and depressing. And I would never want to cross there, even if I wasn't going to get run over by a detention bus, because it's really sad, and it actually is insulting to the building that it's being glommed onto. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Rosa. Vera?
Yes, Patrick, thanks. I guess I'm going to pile on as well, too, because I think it's really hard for us to really fairly comment with all this whole section of the sidewalk being blocked off. And then knowing as well that there's going to be a dismantling going on. So that means further aspects and footage of the sidewalk is going to be blocked off. And I don't even know what the plans are. We haven't seen it. To what extent, to what length is it going to go down to Walker? White Street, I guess, is going to be decommissioned. People won't be able to use White Street anymore to go from Center through to Baxter. I mean, to look at the Sally Port just like this without knowing what the dismantling plans are going to be is really hard for us to comment fairly on. So I guess I need to, Jeff, did you say the dismantling the contractors on this call, or you have plans already, or is that going to be presented to us at some?
Yes, they are on the call, but again, they haven't officially been haven't officially started, so that will be next week most likely, and then we will come back to you with a full plan for the dismantle.
And
when are they coming back?
I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Vera, but I find it rather. It's December. We're in December. When are they coming back, and how much time does the community get before it all happens?
Well, as I mentioned, they will not be starting construction in January, so we will likely come back in January, February, but we'll be sure to keep you guys posted on that date before work starts.
So the Sallyport is, I'm confused. What is the timeline? Sallyport is going to be built before dismantling, together when you dismantle. What is the
So the sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to.
That's okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
The reason we're here at this particular point in time, besides updating you on the timeline, of course, is for the PDC requirements. So everything is sort of happening at once. Robert, I don't know off the top of my head what the order is for the work in terms of, I believe the Sallyport comes first because then we're going to dismantle the building. So.
All right. So again, I mean, I really would like to know how the building's going to be dismantled and how that together is going to impact the going in and out and the closing off of the street with respect to the Sallyport, because I feel like we can't really comment or understand the full impact. You can't look at it piece by piece. You have to look at it in a totality to really be able to understand the impact this is going to have on the community and traffic flow, et cetera. You know, that is one of my comments. The second thing is I don't know if anybody can answer this, but I know you've been doing a lot of testing and borings, and even to the extent all the way up to Leonard Street. I wanted to know if you are able to give us the results of those boring tests and what you've found with respect to those, and as to why you've actually gone all the way out to Leonard Street.
We did share the summary of some of the borings. I don't remember the exact date. Maybe one of my colleagues does.
Yeah, we shared an executive summary of the results, technical results of the borings, and shared that with Community Board 1, District Manager, and I believe it got to Ms. Moore and her committee. They originally asked, so we supplied that. And then most recently, we were asked by Community Board 1 for the actual documents resulting from the borings. And that is why we created the executive summary, because it was easier to get that to the community quicker. If you want the actual documentation, it has to go through a FOIL request, which already happened. I believe it was Lucian who submitted the request to DDC. So it's going through that process now. And at some point, you'll get an answer back on that.
How soon?
Why should anything that we do have to go through a FOIL request? I find that repugnant. Honestly, it takes.
Oh.
I'm sitting on FOIL requests from late 2020. I mean, that's absurd. We're looking at FOIL requests that don't get responded to for over 12 months. Why isn't there a partnership where things are being voluntarily produced?
That is a good question. We get that question all the time. I certainly understand the frustration. It's just a way of streamlining all information that comes out of the agency.
It's not streamlined.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up with the FOIL officer tomorrow and ask her what the status of the FOIL request is from the district manager, and we can get back to you guys tomorrow to see if there's...
If this is going to be a true partnership and the spirit of true partnership, it can't rely on FOIL requests. It just can't. All right,
Understood.
sorry, Vera, I didn't mean to hijack your...
No, thank you.
That was
Go
the
ahead.
point. That was the point of the executive summary. It's basically telling you, you know, the high level of what the results of those borings were. So that's what we thought. Well, actually, we know that's what the community board, at least the Ms. Moore's committee, wanted to see. So that was the quickest way we can get answers on that. That's why it went that way.
I can just add, Norberto's Alice Blank. I also chair the Environmental Protection Committee. I was actually the person who asked for the probes. We've had many people in the community asking for it. I think people want the full information. The summary was simply stating that all was well, and that was encouraging to hear. But there are many people who would like a more in-depth answer, which are, of course, in these probes, which you should be really readily available through, I would imagine, would it be DEC? So we're very hopeful you can get this to us quickly now that you have the FOIL request. Thanks. And we would be able to review them, and you know, the public could see them at the Environmental Protection Committee. Thanks.
Patrick,
Right.
yeah, just one more question.
Yep.
I know that there are people from the public that have questions. I'd like to know, since you were talking about dismantling, which of the tenants in Chung Pak have been displaced, and can we see the results of their buyout agreements? Are you able to, is anybody from the city able to tell me this?
Well, actually, for that, we could certainly actually get into that. But, you know, tonight, this is about the PDC review process, and we're here to talk on the interim Sally Port. If for other questions that are reaching beyond that to the greater program, we have other meetings reserved for those types of questions.
So we would also want DCAS to be part of that conversation. I don't believe they're on tonight.
Right.
All right, fair enough, Norberto. Tammy, were you still have your hand up? Were you?
I'd love to hear what those other meetings are, because the way that the NAC operates, there is no agenda sent out. There's no notes. Even if you're on the NAC, which I am as chair of CB1, there is no agenda sent out. There are no notes from the meeting sent out. There are no slides. So you don't know what is going to be discussed. I cannot tell you today, 3 months after the last meeting, exactly what was discussed. I can tell you from sitting on another CAC, and Toby is here from ESD, they send out agendas. I know what's going to happen. I get my notifications. So I'm very curious when you say that we will have additional meetings, what they will be, when they will be, and can we get an agenda? I don't think that's actually, I think that's the public's right, even if you're on a CAC.
Sure, we agree with that. We could certainly work offline on an agenda with you personally, if you'd like, and ensure that you get that. And we do have a meeting time and date on hold next week, Wednesday, the 22nd. So I don't know if Andrew from CAU, if you're on the line, if there's some more information we could share about that.
All right, I'll tell you what, in the interest of time, why don't you guys collect your thoughts on that and submit it to the CB1 host so that it gets put into the chat, because I do want to move on. We've got a number of members of the public who've got their hands up as well. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Tammy. I'll come back to you guys if you have additional questions, but I want to make sure we get folks their opportunity to ask questions. I want to recognize Edward Kucha, who's had his hand up for quite a long time, and then the council member electable after that. Edward?
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Well, first, I should apologize in advance if any of this gets hostile. I assume that not just me, but anyone who follows may be hostile, and I guess you shouldn't stone the messenger. But let me say who I am. My name is Edward Kucha. I'm an attorney. I am a tenant in Chung Pak. My back wall and the wall of the soon-to-be demolished jail share a common wall. So I'm deeply concerned about what's happening here. I'm concerned foremost, there's been no communication with me about what's going to happen here. So I certainly would like to know about these meetings, what's going to happen. I'm deeply concerned about the environmental effects of what's going to happen with both your construction of the Sally Port and the eventual demolition of the jail. What's going to happen to myself, my employees, my clients. We speak for a moment about my clients. I'm a human rights and asylum attorney. I represent people who have been persecuted in other countries that seek asylum here. Let's please not make sure they and my staff and myself are not persecuted by the city of New York as well. I would like to please urge this group, this community board, and anyone involved here to keep the communication lines open. Stop by my office. My office is at 121 Walker Street. I do share a common wall with the jail that will be demolished. Someone needs to talk to me. I'm going to be representing likely some other tenants in and around Chung Pak who need to be spoken to. Why haven't you spoken to me? Come on, guys. Okay, lastly, I don't know, since I pass here every day, there's also right now, the other side of Center Street is closed. I don't know if you folks have paid attention to all this. Center Street is not available. The opposite side of Center Street from your Sally Port is closed for construction with planking and things that are going up there. It's not open. I don't know how long that's in planning. But if you close Center on your side and the civil court side is also closed, Center will be useless to anyone walking by. And with that, I'll say thank you. And again, sorry for the hostility. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. That was bad. I don't know if the folks from the city team want to address Edward's comments.
Yes, so we will shortly have a community liaison on board who will canvass the neighborhood, speak to you directly, sir, and all the other impacted businesses in the area well before construction actually starts, to hear your concerns and to share as much information as we can.
Okay.
Right.
I'm going to recognize next Councilmember-elect Christopher Marte.
Just a FYI next. Can you hear me, Patrick?
Yeah, we got you, Chris. Thanks.
Just FYI to the design team and whoever you onboard, this community board likes to see every single detail possible. We've had thousands of questions in the past that gone unanswered because these presentations have been extremely short and typically not enough slides to even try to inform, let alone convince that this process is being done thoroughly and respecting the community. This current presentation, there's a lot of red flags and still a lot of unanswered questions. If you see what's happening on White Street now, because of the current traffic of buses, cars being parked, the actual ground is sinking. How do we know that the sidewalk on Center Street won't sink once we have a year worth of trucks, cars coming in and out of the Sally Port? How do we make sure that it remains ADA compliant? You know, there's a senior building right next door. There's seniors all throughout Chinatown, one of the largest aging community in this district. How do we make sure that that street remains safe for those residents? I'd love to see more safety protocols. What if there's a protest, if there's a high profile case happening and there's reporters outside, there's a rally? How do we know that people are going to remain safe? Are you going to hire additional security staff? There's just so many questions, not just what the architects on Community Board 1 has notified, but for the public to know that this is actually being thought out in a proper way. Have you done a traffic analysis? Do we know what time of the day are these buses coming in? Will other cars other than correction buses be able to go in and out of the Sally Port? There's just a lot of questions, and I highly recommend that you come back to this community, respect this community, and give us a really thorough presentation next time.
Thank you. And I also highly recommend, if I may say so, that you get to know the incoming council member and try to work with him, and that you make sure that he's up to date as well. His office is up to date.
And please, whenever you onboard your community liaison, please share that information with everyone on this call.
Absolutely, and just she's also speaks Mandarin and Cantonese, FYI. I know that was something that we heard loud and clear, and something we worked very hard to find someone who met that criteria. So.
Next, we're going to recognize Bill Bielowski. Sorry if I'm chopping that up, and then Jan Lee, you're next. Bill, are you with us?
I'm an architect. I live on Walker Street and represent the Walker Street Homeowners Association. I agree with all the comments that have been made so far, in particular, aesthetics of this thing that's going to be here for 5 years are truly unfortunate. I think we can do a little better for what it's going to be, but I don't know how anybody can opine on this without seeing the entire context of what's coming. There's a logistics plan for the demolition of this building that's going to involve a very serious set of sidewalk sheds. They're going to go up and down Center Street that these buses are going to have to weave themselves through the legs of. I don't think it's possible for the community board to opine on this now. It's way too early. The drawing should include what that the dismantling work is going to look like, the logistics plan, where trucks are going to stack. This is all feel like it's forced. You're here a month early, if not 2 months early. We should see the whole thing together. And I urge the community board to do whatever they can to communicate with PDC to ask for this thing to be kicked back, buy a little more time, stop looking at this through a sniper scope, one little detail at a time, give the community a whole shot at it. Thank you.
Many thanks, Bill. Jan Lee, you're next.
Hello?
Yeah, Jan, we can hear you, but it's really faint. Are you able to get a
Okay,
little closer to the microphone?
sorry about that. I'll try to speak loudly. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit, but do your best.
Sorry. I just want to say a few things. First of all, thank you to this committee for this. Obviously, as it was brought up before, I'm not exactly sure why at this late hour we are looking at plans for a Sally. None of these buildings suddenly grew out of the ground. So why did we not see this in a year and a half of NAC meetings? This is unacceptable. This Sallyport being brought to us at the end of 2021 is unacceptable. We should have seen these in the NAC meetings that were supposed to be thorough. DDC was there. We should have seen these a long time ago, and this committee and the community board should have been able to opine on very detailed drawings that really should have been presented a long time ago. This is the problem. I cannot, in good conscience, ever think that this is a transparent process because of the way that it's been going. And I also want to say that the Sallyport, it's a great thing that it's being moved to the other side of the building, because I was one of the kids in Columbus Park who had to witness people getting out of patrol cars and having a perp walk down Bayard Street and Baxter Street, an absolute disgusting display. And that should never have happened, for the sake of the dignity of the people who are being detained and for our community. So all along that this thing is being presented on the other side of the street, all enclosed with buses that are able to go inside. Why the hell didn't you do that earlier? You could have done that years ago. And the fact that you're building a skyscraper jail and using this time to put this building there, away from the park, away from the view, does not speak to the moral imperative that you guys have said was the concept for the borough-based jails to begin with. This is absolutely disgusting that the purpose of this Sallyport is to shield from the public, where you could have been doing that years and years and years ago. Because let's be reminded, this other Sallyport, the one that's being used, was only probably 40 feet from a public park, the park that I grew up in. So I want you guys to know that this is absolutely aberrant. It should never have been presented at this late hour. There is nothing that has changed with the buildings around that should have. This whole plan for the Sallyport should have been discussed in the NAC meetings that we took all of this time to attend. I don't know how you people sleep at night. I don't know how you could present this in good conscience a few days before the holidays, and you're supposed to come back after the holidays with something more detailed that should have been done literally a year and a half ago. You have no excuse. So
Mr. Lee, if I could just clarify the timeline. This is a design build project. So the design build team, the dismantle team that Robert is a part of.
Respectfully, you knew respectfully though, you knew that you would have to be moving people by buses into the buildings. This whole Sallyport idea could have been presented to us a very long time ago.
Jan, I get the frustration, but
I just want to make a slight clarification.
Got to hear him out. Jeff, carry on.
We did not have a design builder on board until, again, they're not even officially on board. We're here tonight as part of the PDC process. They will be officially on board likely as of next week. And we did not have anyone on board to design a Sallyport. So we didn't have anything to show you. Understand on the larger point, I don't know the history, and I apologize that I'm not familiar with it, but we came to you as soon as we had a design to share for the actual building, which is part of the PDC process. I understand the frustration, but I'm just trying to make it very clear. There was nothing to share with you, the community at large, prior to very recently. So
thank you for the clarification, Jeff, but it's more than just frustrating, because there is no excuse, even in a rudimentary level, to have known that you had to bus people in, you know that you had to get them into the buildings. This, even at a rudimentary level, should have been discussed in the NAC meetings while DDC was there. You knew at some point you had to move human beings. You don't have to show a level of detail as you're doing tonight. In fact, I think that this is very late to be looking at such a high level of detail. This blue block should have been shown to us a year and a half ago. That blue block should have been the starting point, and therein lies the frustration. But more importantly, this is why this jail should not be built in a design, build, construction. We have no faith that this is going to be a functioning jail. We have no faith that this is going to be safe, precisely because of this. You guys get somebody to design it, and minutes later we hear about it. That's unacceptable. We should have at least seen that blue block at least a year and a half ago.
Thanks, Jan, as always. We're going to go next to a member of the public who's listed as John, J-O-N. I'm sorry, I don't have your last name. And then Howard Quee is going to be next.
I've had the pleasure of participating in all these meetings so far.
John, sorry, if you can just identify yourself with your full name for the record, we'd appreciate it.
This is John Alpert. I am the co-founder and co-executive director of Downtown Community TV Center, the public organization that is closest to all of this activity. We are 96 feet away from this sally port. Just as a new point of fact, we've been saying that just like the good attorney that spoke beforehand, that nobody has come by to talk to them. Nobody has come by to evaluate the impact of the destruction and construction upon his business. We are a landmark building. We are a valued community institution. We have trained 70,000 New Yorkers free of charge. We have a high school program in which 100% of our high school students go on to college. And I had structural engineers here last month, and they said the proposed construction is a direct threat to a landmark building, and statutorily we were supposed to have been inspected. We have not been inspected, and you guys are rushing. And this is an old trick of doing all this stuff right before Christmas. You haven't given any consideration to the impact on our organization and the impact of the rest of the community. And you come back, this is going to be a blue door, this is going to be a red door. You haven't done the work you're supposed to do. So I'd like to know, when is somebody coming over to evaluate the impact on our building?
So as I mentioned, we'll have a community liaison on board in January, and then she will set up an appointment for the design build team to talk to the neighboring buildings.
Well, I appreciate that, but you will have already developed your plan. And this is what we're talking about, design and build. Design and build ignores the impact on the community.
Right. I don't agree, sir. I mean, again, if we damage your building, then we're responsible. There's no question about that. And that's certainly not our intention. DDC does work all over the city. Things do happen. I'm not going to say they don't, but we are very conscious of that impact. And if for some reason, unfortunately, something does happen to your building, we'll have to figure out how to fix it.
Well, I beg to differ, because the historical record shows that you have done nothing that shows that you care. You've done some test borings in the street, but you haven't come and examined our building and the precarious nature of our building because of what underlies at Collect Pond, because of the pilings that are going to be exposed when you withdraw the water table. This is what the structural engineers have told me is guaranteed to happen. And your community liaison, as nice as they are not the structural engineers that need to come by and look at this very valuable landmark. And so I differ with what you say. I'd like to ask you one other question, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
There is a sally port that is on White Street right now. It doesn't get you, I don't know whether it's connected underground into the tombs, but it does get you into holding cells. And there's been a lot of construction activity that goes on in the nighttime. Would you be able to share with us what the city is doing in that? Because you did a lot of work in the existing tombs without telling us. You emptied the tombs out. You sort of kept that more or less secret. What's going on in the Sallyport and in the underlying area in the building between Center Street and Lafayette Street?
Sasha, I don't know if you're aware of any
Yeah,
construction.
I'm not aware of any work. I mean, all I know is that I don't believe the Manhattan Detention Center extends between Center Street and Lafayette Street.
Mhm.
The tunnel is between, the tunnel is really under the facility, is my understanding.
Mhm. Okay, because you do have an existing Sallyport. You know, there might be other answers to this, and you know, this is the type of thing that we as a community would appreciate if we were involved in the search for those answers instead of being presented with a fait accompli. You basically said that there's a ticking clock that basically is 1 or 2 months to demolition, and you're sharing things with us for the first time, and we don't think that that's the way it should be done. Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thanks, John. Howard Wyze next, and then I saw Jonathan Hollander has his hand up, and then we're going to close the discussion and go on to the committee deliberation resolution. So we do need to move this along, folks. So Howard, you're next.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, my question is, and I agree with what Jan and Chris and John just spoke about, but my question is on the maneuvering space, because the maneuvering space has to be as big as the Sallyport that's marked in blue. And I find that the most dangerous area because I would not like to walk by a bus that's either backing into the Sallyport or backing out of the Sallyport. So my question is, how big is the maneuvering space? Is that going to go into the White Street space? And also, how many bus trips are you planning on a daily basis going into that Sallyport? Hello?
Yeah, Sasha, again, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I don't know if you can talk about the.
Yeah, I mean, I can only give an unsatisfactory answer about the bus trips. I will look, we, in our final environmental review, we have produced these numbers. I do not have the numbers offhand. I know that core production generally is, centered around 2 points of the day, both in the morning, getting people into court, in the afternoon, getting people out. But the total number of bus trips can be found in the final environmental impact statement, which unfortunately I don't have, but we can look that up.
Okay. Sorry, Howard, are we good?
Well, that really didn't answer any of my questions there. You know, how big is that maneuvering space? I figured it's got to be as big as the Sally.
Right.
And that, like I says, that's where the safety lies, because I walk that part of Center Street quite often, and I don't want to walk beside a bus that's backing up.
Right. Which I think was something that the committee is very, very concerned about as well, and I suspect will make its way into our resolution. Howard, that's give you a short shrift, but I'm going to move on to Jonathan Hollander. Jonathan?
The opportunity to speak. Can you hear me?
We can.
I want to sort of second what John Albert was saying. I run the Battery Dance Company. We're located at White Street between Lafayette and Broadway, so we're 1 block over. We have hundreds of dancers, dance students, ballet students coming and going from our facility every day. I feel like the entire project has been under a veil of secrecy. You know, I kind of live in fear of the day when the dismantling begins. And I, you know, at attending all of these meetings, I have no idea what that timing looks like. And, you know, just as was said earlier, when people were removed from the Manhattan Detention Center, taken to Rikers Island, I personally thought that that was shocking because we'd heard Judge Lippman say that there was a moral imperative to take care of people in Rikers, and that, you know, it was a blot on our community and our city. And meanwhile, we're sending more people into this degraded, dangerous situation. Everybody reads the papers. We know that there are more and more people being incarcerated instead of this lower number that was put forth to the City Planning Commission. None of us believed that, and now we know that we were right. So, you know, I would like to know, when are shovels going in the ground? When is the first dismantling going to happen? And it's been said before at the last meeting that I attended that this process was being rushed through because a new administration was coming in. And there was indication that the new administration, and as we've heard from our recently elected city council member, there's a lot of opposition to the entire project. So, you know, it's kind of inconceivable to me that we're moving ahead with this at speed, and the fear that, you know, a bulldozer is going to come and start working, start taking things apart so that it's irrevocable and can't be, you know, nobody can stop this process. I really feel like there are people who are so involved in creating this plan that they're not looking at any other issue other than getting this thing done and get the dismantling started so that nobody can question it from that point on. And it's a huge, huge mistake on the part of the city. I am dedicated to this city. I started a small, tiny nonprofit organization 46 years ago in the city, dedicated to bringing the arts into public schools and to the public. And what I see here is my city doing the wrong thing to an entire community with nobody being able to stop it. And these meetings are like social work. It's like you're being told, you know, that you can choose this or you can choose that. You can't choose anything because they're planning to bulldoze this building, regardless of any of the intelligent, thoughtful questions that are being brought up. There is no trust. There is no honesty in this process, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, I'm going to bring our discussion to a close. I'm going to open this up for the committee to consider a resolution, and I want to focus the committee on the PDC component of this. Again, there are going to be additional public meetings on the overall MDC concept. We've been heard out before on this. I get the frustration, I really do. I also get that as chair of this committee, we need to move this item along. So focused specifically on the PDC, we have already heard concerns regarding the lacking of the presentation. And particularly, it sounds like there's been a lot of concern about the loss of sidewalk space, the safety issue with respect to little sidewalk space for pedestrians, and how the buses are going to be turning in and out of there. I also heard a concern that just plain old the design is bad, which is within scope for us to consider and something that we would put into the resolution. So with that, I see there are 3 hands up, Tammy, Vera, and Alice. I'm going to recognize Tammy first. Just ask the committee members, please, 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 let's keep it as tight as possible, and let's get to our resolution as soon as we can. Tammy?
I wanted to include something in there when we're talking about PDC, about the lack of any kind of contextuality to the building or the neighborhood or anything in terms of public design in its core of what design is. It's a big blue nothing, and we've not seen anything to make it feel like it was anything more than a backyard shed. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Tammy. Alice?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. First of all, could we get a date as to when the PDC meeting is? And are we seeing a full presentation at some point? And the slides were not scrolled through. I have no idea what we're really reviewing here. So those 2 questions. Are we seeing it again? And if not publicly, can we all be sent the deck? And when is the PDC meeting?
So I'll ask the city team to tell us when the PDC meeting is, and then to answer the second part of the question, we're voting tonight on a resolution. So my understanding, unless Diana can correct me if I'm wrong, we're not going to have another opportunity to review or visit this.
Okay, could we be sent the deck, the full deck with all the slides that were there? Could we ask?
Absolutely, make that request.
Okay.
No, I
get a
don't know if one of my colleagues knows the exact date offhand. Dora, I see.
Yeah,
Thank
hi,
you.
this is Dora Blunt from DDC. The PDC meeting for this would be January 18th if it's put on the agenda.
Thanks. And can we get the full deck of the entire, I think it was called from the architects Lero, the dismantle project that's described. I think it's called the Manhattan Jail Dismantle PDC Presentation PowerPoint. Could we have that sent to the community board?
I think once it's finalized, yes. I don't know if we can send it since we haven't sent it to PDC yet, but we'll confer and get back
Could
to
you
you.
send what you were going to present tonight that you summarized?
Sure.
So that full presentation, I think there were over 20 slides or more. That would be great. Thank you.
Jeff, make sure Diana gets a copy of that. That's what we'll.
Actually, yeah, the presentation from tonight we've already sent to Diana and
great,
Lucian.
All right, so we'll figure out how to make that available to folks.
With the missing drawings, all the missing elevations and plans that we never saw. Is that correct? Not the one we saw, but the one that we didn't see.
Yeah,
we'll make some edits.
Yeah, we'll include some additional slides. No problem.
I'd like to make a friendly suggestion that we ask PDC not to take this vote on January 18th because we've not had actually a full presentation with detail.
I would second that.
Yeah, here's what I would propose in that regard, because we do face this obviously in licensing and other issues. Since we don't control their calendar, can't mandate it, I think that should be our first ask. And we should have something to say about what, to the extent of what has been presented to us, here are the problems with it and why we vote the way we vote.
And if that's the case and my motion is not accepted, then I think that I would change the motion that we make this a resolution to be a full denial until they come back with all the slides and everything else. We have seen presentations from the Battery Park City Authority before they went to PDC. It is absolutely incredible that they came, showed us nothing, and asked us to say yes.
Right, and what I'm suggesting is, given that we don't control PDC's calendar, that we author a resolution that calls for them to adjourn it for further presentation or further information to the community board. But in the alternative, based on the limited information that we've been presented, here's how we feel, which I think we're kind of getting a sense of how we feel. Alice and then Rosa. Or I'm sorry, Alice, you still have your hand up from before.
No, I'm sorry, I'm done. Thanks, Patrick.
I'm going to recognize Rosa.
Thank you. Given that the Sally Port is basically to get vehicles in and out of this area, I think that it is impossible for us to take it under consideration without actual dimensions related to how much space the vehicles need to move in and out of the area, which ties back into my earlier point about pedestrian safety. So if you can't even present to us how much space you're going to basically close off for 7 years of public, passage space on a street, on a pretty big street, then we can't. How do we have this conversation? I mean, that's got to be like the most basic information, right?
Right.
So that's number one. And then number two is hearing from the neighbors of the building. I mean, building demolition or work 101 is you need to have a pre-construction survey done, right? You need to know what the existing conditions are before you go and damage those existing conditions even further. And that's for your protection, which is our tax dollars, and the other side's protection.
So
right?
to be clear on that point, Rosa, not to interrupt you, and I apologize, but I think the construction of the Sally Port at 100 Center is a little distinct from the dismantling part in and of itself.
Okay, apologies. I'm not as familiar.
So just to clarify, that the PDC application is just for the Sally Port. The dismantle is not part of the PDC application. And what they are hearing on January 18th is just for the Sally Port.
I would say that you need to give us more information, because you're talking about very large vehicles moving in and out on a pretty regular basis out of the Sally Port, and yet you're not even addressing, I mean, without Alice asking for that further detail of the plan, we would not even have seen the vehicular path and the ramifications of that to the public space, right? There is no sidewalk left over. You're blocking off the majority of the road too. And if, as another person had mentioned earlier, the other side of Center Street is also closed, then where do people walk? I mean, how does that work for 7 years? That doesn't make any sense to me.
So all good concerns. I think you're right. Here's what I've heard, and folks, tell me if there's major disagreement. The resolution, as I'm hearing it, is a flat no for two reasons. First of all, a flat no because we have not been provided a proper presentation, and there is so much detail that's lacking, including the many items that folks have cited that we'll put in there. And we ask PDC not to consider this application on the 18th, but to do so at a later date whereby the applicant can come back to the community board with a more fulsome presentation. But if PDC chooses to proceed on the 18th of January, the information that the community board has is so woefully insufficient, and there are so many concerns that the PDC should reject this out of hand. So it's a flat no for those two reasons. Am I hearing that correctly? I think so. So, Richard Corman has his hand up. Richard?
No, I was just about to say, yes, from my perspective, I think you captured it well, Patrick. I only had things to add to the issues that they haven't addressed, which we can get to later.
Well, now's the time. If you can quickly list them for us, I'm going to call the question on the resolution.
Yeah, we heard from a number of people, and particular Chris Marte, the no traffic studies for this over the course of 7 years, the sidewalk, the sinking sidewalks in possible streets. What kind of safety protocols that are related to all the issues that people are raising, and the ADA compliance analysis and remediation if there needs to be. At least those are the ones that, in addition to the ones that I think we've been hearing.
We will certainly include those. So, and sorry, I'm just trying to move us along. So with those many concerns and sort of that layout, as I mentioned, I'm going to call the question on the resolution and ask among the committee members for, we'll do this by acclamation. So I'll assume you're in favor unless you tell me right now, is there anybody opposed? Hearing none. Any recusals? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the resolution unanimously passes. All right, thank you, folks.
Patrick,
move on. Yep.
I'm sorry to jump in here, but could you please, there's one question I'd like answered. I thought this was going to be a little bit of a general update. Could I just get an answer as to why the presentation was called the Manhattan Jail Dismantle PDC Presentation PowerPoint on the top of the deck? Is this not part of the dismantling? In other words, I guess that was confusing to me. It was the Sally Port. Are we getting then another presentation next month on the Manhattan Jail Dismantle, which was part of this PowerPoint, but we didn't see it yet? It looked like it was already prepared. I just was confused by that.
Sure. The reason it said that is because there's the design builder that was selected is doing the dismantle as well as building the Sally Port. So that's why it was. It's a team. Lero is part of that team. Yes.
So will you be coming back when to show us the rest of the PowerPoint presentation?
We're committed to coming back to you before the work starts on the dismantle as well as the Sally Port.
Could you give us a month, an estimate?
Well, we haven't officially brought the design builder on board until, again, hopefully next week. So as soon as we have a schedule, we will let you know. Again, there's several months of preparation before actual work starts. So we
Has
have
the
time.
demolition contract been signed with the city of New York?
Has it been registered with the comptroller? I don't believe so. Maybe
I think it was a different question, Jeff.
Has it been signed? We have a design builder selected, yes.
And the controller has signed off on that? I mean, I don't know the whole process, but
Yeah, right. That's the last step in the process.
And has Scott Stringer signed off on this?
If one of my colleagues knows offhand, I don't remember offhand if this there because there are 4, so I apologize.
Could you get back to us then
It
tomorrow
is not
morning?
registered yet with the comptroller. Thank you. One of my colleagues just texted me.
Oh, they have not. So say that again. I'm sorry. I
So
interrupted.
the last step in the process to finalize the contract is for the comptroller to register the contract. So DDC has selected the design builder, and then the last step is for the comptroller to register the actual contract for that design builder.
And he has not.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick, can you please make note to include all of that detail that they have come to present to us before the contracts are finalized and signed? And that the presentation denoted both, but was only, again, partial.
Sure. We'll get that in there. All right. Thanks, folks. I'm going to close this item. We're going to move on to the next and final item on our agenda tonight, which is an update of great interest to folks in the community on World Trade Center Site 5. We're going to hear tonight an update specific to the proposal for the Modified General Project Plan, or what we call the MGPP. Toby from the Empire State Development Corporation is going to be presenting and speaking to us. I want to be clear that just like the last item, there have been a number of forums already, including the Environmental Protection Committee, Community Board 1, that's heard pieces of this project. So we don't want to turn this into an entire forum on the project in and of itself, but we do want to focus on these issues, and so I would ask folks to try to stay focused. So with that, Toby, are you with us? There you are. Toby, if you'll introduce yourself and take it away, the floor is yours. Can't hear you.
Yes, good evening,
There we go.
everyone. Thank you for having me as part of tonight's agenda. Recognizing that it's already about 8:15 and we've already had 2 hours change in discussion, I'll try to be as succinct and substantive as possible in my presentation, and then of course make time for question and answer. I'd like to note from the beginning, I apologize. I have a hard stop at 9 p.m. I do have family and personal commitments that I must get to. So again, I'm trying to make the best use of the time, but please do note that I must log off at 9 p.m. At the very latest. So as Patrick noted, again, World Trade Center Site 5 project has been presented to Community Board 1 in various forums. More recently, there was a public forum that was hosted by the elected officials last Thursday related to affordable housing. But I still want to respect the fact that there might be folks where this is your very first time being introduced to the project or to the discussions with regards to the World Trade Center campus. So I will take a few seconds just to provide some project background. Again, Toby Jai-Simi, Project Director representing Empire State Development. I was joined by my colleagues representing the Port Authority, but due to another commitment, Justin Bernbach had to sign off for another meeting, but just wanted to note that the Port Authority was also represented at tonight's meeting. As I said earlier, just as quick background, World Trade Center Site 5 is located on 130 Libby Street, or the former location of the Deutsche Bank building, which was severely damaged as a result of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. LMDC, which is the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, used HUD Community Development block grants to remediate the site, to clear the site, and of course, to acquire the site. In 2006, in February of 2006, there was a memorandum of understanding between LMDC and the Port Authority, which allowed the Port Authority agreed in essence to provide the parcels that it owned at the center of the campus, including within the footprints of the Twin Towers, to allow for the development of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, and also the Performing Arts Center, in exchange for Site 5 and adjacent parcels, which were owned by LMDC. A few years later, in February of 2019, there was another memorandum of understanding between LMDC and the Port Authority to jointly issue an RFP for Site 5 that would allow for commercial use as of right, or mixed use development, which would require modifications to the general project plan. I'll go into more detail about that in a little bit. In June of 2019, the Site 5 RFP was released. And in February, earlier this year, there was conditional designation of a development team For a proposed project, that would include a mixed-use development, residential tower with 25% permanently affordable units, office, community facility space, amenity, and also fitness space, as well as retail. If the proposed mixed-use project is approved, LMDC would transfer the site to ESD, and ESD would enter into a long-term lease with the development team. And consistent with the MOU that I referenced earlier in 2006, all of the rent payments would go to the Port Authority as compensation for the 9/11 Museum, Memorial, and Performing Arts Center sites. Now, I know, of course, that affordable housing is of key importance to the community and has been a key part of the discussions related to the project. Just wanted to note again that for the proposed project, 25% of all of the residential units, 300 units, would be permanently affordable at an average of 50% of area median income. And for example, currently the AMI ranges at 50% of AMI would be $42,000 for an individual and $60,000 annually for a family of four. The RFP required that the affordable units be cross-subsidized by market rate units. And I received some questions in advance of today's meeting related to some of the agenda items. And I know that there were some concerns with regards to whether or not there'd be a poor floor, poor door. But please note that the affordable units would be dispersed in the building. They would not be concentrated, and there would be a shared entry. The state agency, New York State Homes and Community Renewal, which is responsible for affordable housing statewide, would enter into a regulatory agreement with the development team that would lay out the project's permanent affordable housing obligations. The community board had some questions with regards to the unit distribution for the project, the percentages in terms of unit size and the AMI bands. We're still very much premature in the process, and so that information for the unit distribution is not available both at the current proposed 25% affordable housing requirement or at the 30% requirement, which was what was requested. So just please note, though, that once that detail is available, that it would be included and would be part of the details of the project that HCR would monitor in the regulatory agreement with the developer. So there'll be a form of oversight to ensure that there is the proper disbursement of the units through the tower. There was a request to look at and to provide details in terms of what the public subsidy would be that would be needed for increased affordability at the project. And so this chart was shared during the elected forum that I'd mentioned that occurred last week. And I thought it would be helpful for tonight's discussion. Again, just quickly, the state agency that I referenced earlier, HCR, the annual budget for that agency is approximately $500 million. And so what this chart is showing is the 25% subsidy need for the project right now is proposed as $0. And then for an increased scenario where it's 35%, it would be a subsidy need of $138 million. And that goes progressively through to 100% affordability, which would be approximately $930 million that would be needed to be able to develop the building right now as proposed. As mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, just one more quick point. I want to make sure that I'm responsive to the questions that I'd received. There was a question with regards to whether or not the ESD would permit the developer to restrict access to the building's amenities to any unit type, market rate, or affordable. That is not the case. ESD would not permit for such restrictions. And then there was also a question with regards to the cost for the building amenities space and whether or not that cost would be scaled according to AMI bands or income bands. Those details are not available now, but again, provided that we want equal access to the amenities in the tower, there will be a discussion, of course, with the development team to get more details about that once available. Taking a step back, wanted to note that when we started this process, the understanding was that there would be the public approvals discussions related to the modifications to the general project plan, which I'll get into shortly, and then the actual transaction. So there was conditional designation of a development team back in February, and the understanding was that we would consider both of the items required for the modifications to the general project plan and the actual deal on parallel tracks. In response to community feedback and direction from the elected officials, we've bifurcated the process. And so we're starting with right now is the public approvals process just to allow for there to be additional uses that's permitted at the site. And then further in the spring, as you'll see in the timeline that I'm about to outline, the actual transaction, the actual real estate deal related to the proposed project for Site 5 will be considered. So elements of some of the information that I'll share tonight are general and focused in terms of the modifications to the general project plan, and further details and more specifics in terms of what the final project will be on Site 5 will be considered at a later date. So taking a step back in November, the boards for LMDC and ESD approved the start of the public approvals process. So there's the modifications to the general project plan and also the environmental review that's been done related to the proposed modifications. Just this past Friday, there was public notice that was issued related to the start of the public comment period for both the environmental review and also the MGPP. And I'll get into the details of the public hearing shortly, but note that on January 12th, there will be a virtual public hearing that will be held where members of the public can comment in real time during the hearing via Zoom, or if necessary via phone, there'll be the opportunity to dial in. One can also submit written comments before or after the hearing during the comment period via email and mail. I'll provide those details again in the following slide. And I'll note that the public comment period on these items will remain open through February 15, 2022 at the request of elected officials. And while this is happening, there'll still be continued public engagement and community outreach efforts related to World Trade Center Site 5. And then in the spring, there'll be the second set of board meetings, which would consider, of course, the public comments that were received through the public comment period. And then there would be the action that would be taken with regards to the actual real estate transaction, right? Like what the proposed project from the conditionally designated developer and the site acquisition from LMDC to ESD, and then the long-term lease with the development team. After that initial action is taken by the boards, then there will of course be another public hearing related to the site disposition. So there will be an opportunity for further public comment on the actual proposed project and the real estate transaction. And then there would be a third set of public board meetings related to the transactions for Site 5. And then because ESD, of course, is a public entity, it's subject to the Public Authorities Control Board. So there'd be an application that's made to the PACB and the public meetings subsequent to that. So wanted to note, there was a request to provide some specific details into what is the current general project plan and what the MGPP is looking at. And having learned from the Environmental Protection Committee meeting and having had some, of course, noting the previous presentations that have been made to the board, I'm hoping that this chart helps to simplify and clarify that, and I'm happy to provide more details as I share. So the current approved general project plan was developed back in 2004, and it looks at the entire World Trade Center campus. And what it was proposing is that there'd be 5 commercial towers along with the museum and memorial and cultural uses for the space. So that general project plan really focuses on that, the idea that there would be office buildings, and then there'd be this like very public realm that's dedicated in memory and in honor of those that were lost and signifying the importance of the World Trade Center campus through the museum, the memorial, and the Performing Arts Center. The modifications to the GPP, to the general project plan, are looking specifically at Site 5. So it's considering allowing for there to be greater flexibility in use at Site 5, in addition to the already approved plan. So there is still the ability to have commercial use at Site 5, which is already permitted and wouldn't require any modifications or further environmental review. But what we're proposing here would be looking at mixed-use residential development, which would allow for there to be affordable housing. So without the modifications to the general project plan, there wouldn't even be the ability to consider affordable housing at Site 5. There's additional public benefit because it allows for and requires this pedestrian connection, this pedestrian bridge and connection to Liberty Park, as well as a community facility, which I'd mentioned earlier. So when you're looking at what is the current approved plan, again, it's just a commercial tower, which is what the 14-page general project plan notes, is just speaking generally about the commercial use at the site. And then the modifications to the general project plan, which pulls out text that's just specific to Site 5, again, not touching on the other aspects of the campus, and allowing for there to be greater use. Now, related to the MGPP, the supporting documents for those 2 items for the approved plan and the commercial uses is the commercial design guidelines. The commercial design guidelines look at the entire campus, and they speak to the various aspects of what's proposed for the campus, related, of course, to the museum, to the memorial, and to the 4 other commercial towers. Now, because the mixed-use design, the modifications to the general project plan are looking at there being mixed use, it wouldn't be applicable to have there be the same requirements for a commercial tower be applicable to a mixed use tower. So the mixed use design guidelines were drafted to set us the parameters that would govern what would be developed at Site 5. I'll note that, as I referenced earlier, the public process that we're in now and the comments that may be received on various aspects of the modifications are still in draft form and would be finalized once the public comments have been reviewed and presented to the board. And so it's possible that there are further changes that would be proposed to the general project plan, and as well as the mixed use design guidelines to reflect what the final proposed project is for Site 5. So there's still the opportunity for there to be additional comment to influence the changes that folks in the community are willing to make comment on or seeking to make comment on Site 5, and to have that reflected, in whatever the final approved project is. So again, there's been discussions, greater discussions about there being increased affordability. The MGPP currently says a minimum of 25%. Should that change, right? Should there be a change in terms of what's being proposed for Site 5, then the modifications to the general project plan would reflect that. It would note what the approved project ends up being. I'll note also that the scale of the commercial design guidelines is important because it talks about the various uses, but it really just dedicates, I think, about 3 or 4 pages to Site 5, because the understanding is that it would equally be a commercial office space with, I think, like 2 floors of what would be like big retail, whereas the mixed use design guidelines gets a little bit more prescriptive and allows for there to be this idea of there being greater public realm. There's a greater use and a flow of access through Site 5, both to the connection to Liberty Park, the community facility, which would have its own entrance that's dedicated to it. There will be a shared entrance space, like I said, for the residential uses, as well as the commercial and retail uses for Site 5. Design guidelines goes into details about the sweater and what we consider to be like the envelope of what would be developed at Site 5, the various site setbacks, the ground floor programming, access and connection points with the facility and with the space. And I know, again, because we've bifurcated the process, but there has been presentations to the community board related to what the programming and design by the conditionally designated developer, what their intentions are for the building. But any mixed use program that would be put forth at Site 5 would be governed by these design guidelines. And there's an internal process here at ESD that kind of regulates ensuring compliance with whatever the final document is that would be reflective in the mixed use design guidelines and in the approved GPP. I'm gonna put up the slide that's related to public comment, because I know that was an important question that had come from the community board, which is how can folks make comment? There are really no parameters. That was another question that we received in terms of what are the parameters on the questions and the comments that can be received. If it's related to the modifications to the general project plan and also comments related to the environmental review for the project, these are the ways in which it can be done. And the information can be sent again in writing at World Trade Center Site 5 at esd.ny.gov. It can also be sent by mail if folks prefer to take that route. To ESD with attention to World Trade Center Site 5 proposed amendment, 633 3rd Avenue, 37th floor, New York, New York, 1017. I'm going to stop there. I feel like I ran through this quickly to make the best use of the time. I'll leave this slide up for a few minutes and then I'll take some questions from the board and also from the public. Just noting again that I apologize, but I do have a hard stop at 9 o'clock, so I'll try to be as detailed as possible in my responses.
Toby, thank you, and no need to apologize. My goodness, that was well done in terms of getting through a lot of information quickly and succinctly. Thank you. That was amazing. All right, we're going to go to members of the committee. I see Jill Goodkind has her hand up, then Joe Lerner. So Jill, then Joe, and I'll ask that folks keep things brief. We do want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk. Jill.
Hi, Toby. How are you this evening? My question is with regard to the design guidelines specifically. which are really impossible to find in the materials posted on the LMDC site. There is no design guideline document, by the way. So in it, you have that the tower must include certain design elements that are extraordinarily expensive and would go toward almost preclude making the building more affordable, such as rounded glass corners, which are much more expensive. Glass is expensive and rounded is very expensive. So putting in these design elements, when you say that the modifications are just to allow residential, it's really much more than that. And I think I may have mentioned in the past that it's really, I think, imperative that you explain that it's also going to lock in, should the board approve it, these very, very expensive guidelines. And so my question is, why are you doing this? Why are you locking in such an expensive design element?
Sure, Jill, thank you so much for that question, and I appreciate you taking the time. One, to clarify that there is no specific location on the LMDC page that has the mixed-use design guidelines, so I'll address that with the team tomorrow, just to make sure that it's better highlighted on the LMDC page. So thank you for that. And then the second point, as I'd noted during my presentation, these documents are in draft form and subject to public comment. So if we find ourselves in a place where the LMDC directors and the ESC directors through the public engagement process, we are looking at 100% affordable tower, and of course rounded glass corners would make that more expensive, then the mixed use design guidelines would be updated to reflect that change. And so it wouldn't be such that we would have a requirement that would preclude or limit there being the increased affordability that would be approved at the site. So again, it's still it's in draft form, still subject to public comment. And if the approved plan is such that what's proposed in the mixed use design guidelines prevent it from being developed, then it would be amended to reflect that change accordingly.
So in other words, then the amount of affordable housing must be determined in advance of the date this is going to be voted on.
No, there's still an opportunity for there to be, if there's a modification to, again, the design of the tower, whereas it would mean that it would be 100% affordable tower, right? Or if there's a significant increase in it such that having rounded glass towers would be cost prohibitive for what the intention is, then the governing documents would have to be amended to reflect as much.
Let me just close with saying I don't see any reason why that design element needs to be in this request to modify the proposal. It should not be in there, period, regardless of how much affordable housing is in there. And I think the fact that it's buried and it's not mentioned in any of the documents that you have on your site, regardless of not having the design guidelines, is wrong. And I wouldn't use the word disingenuous, but I think it's wrong.
Sure, Jill, thank you for that. And I'd note that comment can be submitted via the mediums that I posted earlier in my presentation so that it's on the record. And again, whatever the final version of the approved project is would be reflective of, where we are at the end goal.
Thank you, Toby.
Thanks, Jill. I'm going to go to Joe Lerner.
Yeah, I read where there's 12,000 square feet of community space as a public amenity. Well, I live in Southbridge Towers, which is on the east side, and there's no public transportation that will take me to that site. So for us people on the east side, it's not a public amenity.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Lerner. It's well received, and I hear you on that, and I hope that there's a way to have a larger conversation, not specific to Site 5 in terms of accessibility and transportation across our city. But again, that was specific to the scope of my presentation. I just wanted to note that I remember that there was also a question with regards to the programming for the community facility space. And again, I'm giving two answers. One is that the modifications to the general project plan is just allowing for there to be a community facility that's included in the mixed use proposal for the site. And then with the proposed project, right, the conditionally designated developer has established a working relationship with an organization called Educational Alliance, which currently runs the Manny Cantor Community Community Center in another part of the city. And the development team has committed to working with Educational Alliance to host a series of discussions to look at what the best form of programming and operations that should be available to the community at the facility that's being proposed at Site 5. So there are no details yet on what the programming for the community facility at Site 5 would be, because we really hope to be able to have an open discussion with the community, get a better sense of what the needs are, and hopefully what the final product is most reflective of what we hear back.
In the meantime, I'll buy a better pair of sneakers. Thank you very much.
I recommend New Balances or Converse. They're very, well, actually Converse if you don't have arch support, but New Balances are very comfortable.
I know Joe will find the most fly pair he can. So on the transportation point, I think Joe raises a good note. And for those folks who do live on the east side of the financial district, Toby, it might be worthwhile to work programmatically with the Downtown Alliance, who runs a connection bus throughout Lower Manhattan. It may not be the most convenient for folks to get there from that way, but it does go to Battery Park City, and I think could present a real good opportunity. So encourage you to work with the Downtown Alliance on the connection bus. It's a great service that a great business improvement district provides.
For that, I think I'm making a note of it.
I'm going to ask, so two more members of the committee have put their hands up, Richard Corman and Michael Kramer, and then we do have one member of the public so far with a hand up. So we're going to go Richard, then Michael, and then Todd Fine.
Hi, Toby. Nice to see you again. How are you doing? Thanks for taking your nights with us. And Patrick, I want to ask a question about the finding of non-significance. Is that appropriate within this committee?
We're not voting on a resolution, so it's neither here nor there in terms of.
So let me just ask the question. Toby, I was confused, and I'd like some help in understanding exactly what was done with the environmental assessment, because I thought I heard two different things, and I'm not sure which is correct. I thought I heard on the one hand that the assessment compared, determined that there was no difference between the environmental impact study done in 2000 and I forget the year, 7, I think, or 4, for a commercial building versus today on a residential building in 2021. But then I also thought I heard that in fact every element of the environmental impact study was addressed, every topic was addressed, because given the years and the difference in use, by definition, there's a big difference. And so a full impact study was done on each of the issues related to the environment. And which is correct? I don't understand.
Sure, thank you for that comment, Richard. And I'll try to not use as many acronyms as possible, just because I want to be as clear.
Appreciate that.
And I don't have the slides that I'd used for the Environmental Protection Committee meeting, but as I mentioned, there's a current approved plan, and that current approved plan, the full environmental review for it was carried out, as you mentioned, back in 2004 with the final generic environmental impact statement, so the FGEIS. And the FGEIS, of course, was governed by both federal and state guidelines. So there's NEPA, which is the National Environmental Protection Act, and then SEQA, which is the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And when we proposed this idea of there being additional use at Site 5, with there being residential in addition to commercial, we had to look at whether that proposed change would lead to any new impacts that hadn't been previously studied for the site, right? You're comparing what's currently approved, which is commercial, and what is being proposed, which is a mixed-use development. And so that environmental assessment that was done, the environmental review that was done, followed the guidelines for both federal and state, so again, NEPA and SEQA, and used specifically the SEQA technical manual, which is the city's environmental quality review technical manual, and more specifically, the 2020 SEQA technical manual. So whereas we're comparing something that was approved 18 plus years ago, in 2004, we're following current guidelines and directions on how that assessment will be done. So each of the chapters, each of the same chapters that was studied in 2004 for commercial use at Site 5, what we did was we looked at each of those same chapters for residential use or for mixed use development at Site 5 according to the 2020 Secret Technical Manual. And what we discovered is that there are no new adverse impacts, or there are no new significant impacts that would result as this additional use for this site. And so I think what you're referring to in one of my slides, which is the FONSI, which is the findings of non-significance, it's just a technical term, and it's how it is that it's listed per the regulations. But it's just noting that as a result of this proposed amendment, which is to allow for there to be residential use in addition to commercial use, there are no environmental impacts that was identified in the various categories that was compared from 2004 to current. Is that helpful?
I think so, but just a point of, just for clarity, I'd like to just follow for a second. So as an example, we've had since 2004, we've had Sandy, which really transforms things. Is something like that now currently addressed in this new assessment? The fact that climate change has actually radically changed our view of what's happening in Lower Manhattan and the impacts of that.
Yes, that's correct. And also as part of this process, again, because it's we're following both state and federal guidelines, there was an early floodplain notice that was issued for the project back in October, which noted that the World Trade Center Site 5 is being developed in a 100-year and I believe a 500-year floodplain. And so the specific regulations and guidelines related to that were noted as well as there's a second floodplain notice that was issued as part of the documents that were released on Friday. But you're correct, Richard, in that we're not just taking the pre-existing conditions from 2004 and having tunnel vision and looking at it that way, but the Secret Technical Manual, again, is updated and we're looking at the new conditions, specific, of course, like sustainability measures and having it reflected in the analysis that's being done there.
Okay, thank you, Toby.
Thanks, Richard. Michael Kramer, and then we're going to go to Todd Fine.
Hi, Toby. Back in the early 60s, the World Trade Center was originally supposed to be on the East River, and then the Port Authority pivoted to where it is today. So they took 16 acres, they closed 5 streets, they seized 164 buildings, and they did this under the rubric of eminent domain, condemnation. And they did this because there was a public purpose. And the Port Authority decided that the public purpose was that it was for a facility of commerce. So now, obviously, and this went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the poor merchants of Radio Row were all evicted, and the people who lived there as well. So clearly, there is a public purpose in a 9/11 museum. Clearly, there's a public purpose in a performing arts center. Clearly, commerce is being done in the office buildings. I don't get the public purpose of a luxury housing project, and I would question whether there is a public purpose and whether the Port Authority is required to require a public purpose for that site.
Thank you for that comment, Richard, and also just for the education in terms of the history of the campus. Some of it I wasn't necessarily familiar with. I'll note that as part of my presentation, the current proposed project for Site 5 would have 25% affordable housing. I know that there's a larger discussion with regards to increasing affordability at the project, just noting what's currently proposed. So that would equal to 300 affordable housing units. Of course, the connection, this wouldn't be possible, right? The discussion about there being permanent affordability, 300 permanently affordable units at Site 5 wouldn't be possible if we don't have this approved modification to the general project plan. It would just proceed as of right as another commercial development or as an office tower. So I would note that there is this idea of there being a public benefit by allowing for there to be residential use at the site, and 25% of those units being at an average of 50% of AMI, which again is currently $42,000 for an individual or $60,000 for a family of 4. Again, I fully recognize and understand that there's larger discussions with regards to increasing affordability at the project. So I'm not speaking to that larger discussion. I'm just noting to you what's currently proposed.
But My question was about the general project plan. And your answer is that it supersedes the requirements of the condemnation. And I wonder why.
I can't speak to the 1962 or 1964 condemnation or what the intention of it was. I can just speak to what the currently approved general project 2004 general project plan is.
I understand what you're saying. A, it would be important for you to learn more about that, and B, it would be great if we could get an answered as
But
to whether or not.
I don't understand your question, because what we're speaking to isn't with regards to the condemnation or to the history of the World Trade Center campus. It's looking at what the current approved plan is, which was in 2004, to the proposed amendment specific to Site 5, which is to allow for, in addition to commercial, mixed use at the site.
But
so
the
you asked me to go back and look at the condemnation?
Went all the way up to the Supreme Court for a public purpose for this public site. And how can a general plan supersede that?
I'm well beyond my understanding of how one can speak to a condemnation from 1962 to the.
I look forward to your answer.
I'm sorry?
I look forward to your answer.
I don't even know where to begin to answer such a question. So I'll just note that I've received your comment. I don't know if there's an answer that's available.
All right. Thanks, Michael. We're going to move on to Todd Fine. And then, Todd, I'm going to ask you to keep it to 5 minutes, please, because we do still have, we now have another committee member with her hand up for the first time, and then coming back to Jill. Todd?
I'm Todd Fine with the Coalition for 100%. Thank you, Toby, for that presentation. Thank you to the committee. I would like to invite people on the committee or on the community board to watch the public forum that took place on Thursday if they have a chance. There were some very positive commitments, I think, from ESD, from LMDC to work with the elected officials, work with our coalition to find financing options, to find ways to increase the affordability. And I'm worried that the timeline that was outlined tonight might make that a little bit hard to do, because we've been waiting for a year now for those type of positive commitments. So I would like this community board as much as possible to work to facilitate those working sessions and those engagements with Washington and with the state, and not just accept this timeline as given if there's other opportunities that could benefit this community so much. I guess my main question has to do with the slide related to the amount of subsidy, because I don't know if you want to go back to that, but I'm concerned that is really a black box calculation, that it would cost $1 billion to build an affordable tower, that it would require direct public subsidy. I mean, there are so many affordable complexes in New York City that every other generation had built. The idea that it would require $1 billion of direct public subsidy, that private people wouldn't finance that if there wasn't project-based Section 8. I mean, I don't know exactly the assumptions, but I think that it's unfair to just put up that slide with those kind of numbers, those kind of shocking numbers, as a black box. I think those assumptions need to be provided to this committee if that type of slide is going to be presented, because I'm worried that it harms it harms people who want affordable housing when you throw numbers like that out there. So could you explain the assumptions that go into that $1 billion calculation?
Todd, thank you for that question. I'm in no way equipped tonight to be able to do the full financial modeling and analysis that was done to go into that calculation. As you noted, it was a very helpful conversation that was held through the public forum, and I know that there's been a commitment from the elected officials for there to be continued engagement about increasing affordability at Site 5. So what we can do is, once there's those subsequent follow-up discussions, have more details about the analysis that's been done, but I'm just not prepared in the few minutes that's left to be able to go into that level of detail tonight. Okay. And I'd note, just as a follow-up to your question with regards to the timeline, again, where we are is that we're just looking at there being mixed-use development that's permitted at Site 5. Without moving ahead with the MGPP approvals process, we honestly wouldn't even be able to have a conversation about increased affordability at the site because we'd only have the approvals for commercial tower.
Okay.
So I just want to place that in context to you. I know that there's some concerns about us moving ahead with the actual transaction itself, and that's not the case. We haven't started that process in any way. This is, again, just to permit for there to be the consideration for mixed-use development in addition to the already approved commercial use at the site.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I won't ask any more questions. I just like it on the record that I think that slide prejudices people against affordable housing without the assumptions of that calculation. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for the targeted question and for your continued advocacy. I'm going to go to Vicki Cameron of our committee. Vicki.
Thank you, Patrick. Toby, in no particular order, why do you keep calling this a campus?
Isn't that how
it's the wrong word? I know it's the wrong word. Campus, suggests like the campus at Columbia University. Kind of immediately gives us a purpose to approve. So I just want you to know that that word, has different meaning, and we keep using it to influence. Toby, when I saw you were coming, I thought it was lovely to see you again. You were a terrific speaker. But for the life of me, I don't know what we learned tonight that we didn't already. And on behalf of the community, I would like to say that nothing that you say, that you're sent to say, will satisfy the idea that we cannot have an affordable tower and that we need more market rate units, which are outrageously overpriced. So I just want you to know that we are in favor of a socioeconomic diverse building, but not another luxury market rate. We don't need it. We don't want it, no matter how much you are pressing it. Just want you to know you can keep coming, but we hear ourselves and will continue to advocate for that. And lastly, I want to say $1 billion is an absolutely absurd number. Having done this myself for my entire career of over 3 decades, this tower will not cost $1 billion for affordability. That is a number that is meant to frighten people, unless, of course, we expect gold faucets. So thank you very much for being here. I just had to say this.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. I want to roll through, sorry to cut you off, Toby. I want to roll through and try to fit in 2 more. So I'm going to ask a member of the public who's only identified as Laura to come in and speak. And then after that, Tammy has her hand up for first round comments. So that's probably going to do it, but let's see. Laura. Member of the public, Laura is the only identification I can provide. Okay, Laura, if there's time, we'll come back to you. Tammy.
Toby, I highly appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you very much. I know it may feel like we see a lot of you, but I would request that if you can come back in detail, we would put you first on the agenda the next time you come. Unfortunately, the city has us quite wrapped up with all of these things that they have been ignoring us for several months. We do appreciate your diligence in coming. I would even say if you have any of the detailed information, you'd want to join us in executive committee this month, we'd welcome you there and anywhere that you can engage in the public realm. And that's all I'm going to say tonight. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Tammy. Appreciate the succinct nature. So now we're going to come back. Jill has her hand up and then Richard.
Very, very quickly. Toby, the 36,000 square foot physical culture fitness center that is in the design guidelines, is that similar to that would be a requirement should the board approve it?
It's the physical culture the physical culture establishment for the project isn't an MGPP requirement. It's just a description of what is in the tower.
Okay, so it's not part of the plan.
There's fitness use. There's fitness use that's being considered in addition to the mixed use development, like in the description of it. And so, but the square footage is 36,000. I think is just referenced in the mixed use design guidelines.
Yeah, but so it would be then part of the permanent design guidelines should they be voted on?
Should the permanent design guidelines be voted on as is, then yes, there'd be the ability for the developer to provide a physical culture establishment at the space, and fitness use is being considered, but it's not the same as the requirement, for there to be the connection to the park or for there to be a community facility space at the project.
Okay.
It's a permitted use, but it's not a requirement.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Vicky, your hand is still up, but I assume that's from earlier, correct?
I apologize. Take it
No
down.
worries. No need to apologize. All right. You're seeing no other hands up. With that, I'm going to end the presentation, and we're at the end of our meeting. Toby, we got you out before 9 o'clock. Thanks for coming.
My family, thanks.
And we're actually getting our committee, yeah, I see Jason applauding. We're getting our committee done before 9 o'clock. Folks, thank you for joining us. A lot still going on. For those of us who thought we would stride in land use into 2021 or without a lot going on, we fooled you. So, no, seriously, I really appreciate everybody pitching in, Laura and Diana, especially your work in getting prepared for this meeting is especially appreciated. We'll see you all in January. Everybody have a happy holidays, and we'll see you at the other community board meetings. With that, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.